let's get back to the situation in Victoria. Premier Dan Andrews made some lavish promises during the election in November and has some of the biggest infrastructure projects in the nation underway in his state. But he waited till after the election to duck off to China, presumably to ask if they could lend him some cash to pay his debts. And I'm not sure that went too well. So now he's leaning on the other Australian states via the federal government to provide Victoria with a bit of financial relief. Dan, is this sinking in Victoria, and are people getting sick of Dan's profligacy?
Well, not yet, because John Pesutto is spending too much time engaging in, expelling people from his own party. I mean, look, you've got to take the fight straight to Daniel Andrews. Like you say, this is not just a financial helping hand. This would be, one of the single biggest bailouts in the history of federation. That's what he is asking for. Nobody is making that case. I mean, it's getting a bit of traction in the media, but look, at the end of the day, Victoria is pretty cooked at the moment. We've got the biggest debt by far. It's only going in one direction. Daniel Andrews is saying he's going to make a few small changes around the edges in the public service. Well, that's not good enough. We've got these infrastructure projects which we need because of the enormous amount of migration that's coming into this city. Yet because of the stranglehold that the unions have, nothing's getting built. I mean, I live west of the city. I come over the Westgate Bridge. I remember 2 years ago or thereabouts when it first started, they had big banners across the Westgate. They're going to build the Westgate Tunnel, right? They had big banners there saying it's going to open in late 2022. Big banners, ahead of the election in 2022. One day, I was driving down there, all of a sudden, all those banners had gone, right? We are now getting close to mid-2023. This thing is nowhere near built. It is nowhere near getting done. And there are stories like this right across the state. So look, I back in the infrastructure projects, but you're talking about the suburban rail loop is $200 billion. We don't need it. It doesn't help alleviate the population pressures. It's going to cause immense disruption because the government can expropriate land within a certain, parameter of that particular rail loop. They're going to put in these high-rise apartments so more Labor voters can go in there and put them into a permanent majority. That's basically the political play. This needs to be discussed and debated, but where's the opposition on this?
Yeah, you need an effective opposition at a time like this. Now, quickly before you go, a story broke just this afternoon. Google, the global vice president for security at Google, today announced to all staff that finally they don't need vaccine certificates to get into their place of work. Now, the thing that bothers me most about this, Dan, is that Google is the biggest information corporation in the history of the world. No corporation has had more information at its fingertips in history, and yet it is one of the last companies to lift these vaccine mandates. What do you think is going on there?
I don't know. I assume a lot of the pronoun people had to take stress leave after hearing about this, enormously traumatic sort of communication. But look, I just think it gets to the point that people around the world are recognising that almost everything that was done by governments to us in the COVID was wrong. And we're seeing recriminations. We're now seeing front page stories in major newspapers in Australia. I mean, The Australian a couple of weeks ago had a front page story of someone with terrible vaccine injury. I believe it was a vaccine death. And the courage of the problems and that we had are now coming to light. I mean, I think it's obviously too late. But what it does show is people like you, Fred, and people like Alanjones and ADH, and there was probably 5 or 6 commentators. Adam Crichton, he was really good from the start. 5 or 6 commentators who were calling this out and saying, hey, this is going too far. We need to have another approach. All of that's been vindicated. But the problem we have here is because the media backed in this, they're only going to go so far. I mean, the media was just as culpable as the politicians in allowing to happen what happened to us. So all I can say is it should never be allowed to happen again.